Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the My Tech Story Africa podcast. My name is Alice Kanjejo, your lovely host, and just a reminder before we get into the episode, for you to subscribe from wherever you're listening from. It's absolutely free, and it helps this podcast reach the right target audiences and let people know about what's happening in the tech African landscape today. Also, check out our website at mtsafrica.co, and there you can be able to join our MTS community where we're growing, and you will be able to get the latest updates on what's happening across the tech African landscape. Now we can get into the episode. Today we are featuring the lovely Clare Korir, who is the Director of Product at Moringa School. This season's theme has been building the next generation of African tech leaders, and Moringa is one of the schools that enables that. And I'm very excited to be featuring some personalities who have contributed to Moringa's success so far. Clare shares with us her evolution from envisioning a path in chemistry to becoming a key player in tech education. Clare begins her narrative by sharing her unexpected shift from a potential path in chemistry to studying economics at Columbia University in New York.
Chemistry was my favorite subject. I think, unfortunately or fortunately, our education system forces you to just think about your academic journey based on the things that you're good at in class only.
Her journey in education began immediately after university, where she played pivotal roles in establishing schools like the African Leadership Academy in South Africa and the M-Pesa Foundation Academy in Kenya. She also discusses her time as the head of school at Kigutu International Academy in Burundi, showcasing the importance of instilling leadership skills early in students. Clare's insights into the intersection of education and tech provide a unique perspective, making this episode a must listen to. She passionately discusses Moringa School's commitment to bridging the gap between education and employment with an impressive 70% success rate in students securing jobs. The episode closes with a detailed overview of Moringa's school courses, intake schedules, and the supportive learning environment provided for the students. Aspiring tech enthusiasts, educators, and really anyone seeking inspiration will definitely find Clare's journey a testament to the transformative power of education and the impact of institutions like Moringa School in shaping the future of Africa's tech landscape. I hope you enjoy this episode, and now we shall move straight into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the My Tech Story Africa podcast. Today, we are featuring a special guest who is also representing a new series that we are going to be having this season. If you've been tuning in, you know we've featured Carnegie Mellon University in Kigali, Rwanda, as well as soon to be Norsken East Africa. If by the time this episode comes out, maybe you have received some episodes from Norsken. But today we are having someone from Moringa School, and Moringa is a tech education institution that is empowering tech talent and basically enables people to create their own futures through technological solutions. So I'm very excited to have our guest here today, and I am going to give her the opportunity to introduce herself. So Clare, do us the honors of introducing yourself.
All right. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Clare Korir, and I am the Director of Product at Moringa School. I think my journey has actually been a bit interesting because I didn't start out in tech at all. When I was younger, I thought that I was going to go into like chemistry and chemical engineering.
Wow.
But I ended up doing economics at Columbia University in New York. From there, I think that's where my journey in education started. So I've been in education right from when I completed my university training. I worked at a school called African Leadership Academy in South Africa. I helped found, or at least was part of the founding team of M-Pesa Foundation Academy here in Kenya, part of the founding team of the African Leadership University in Kigali. And then my last role before I came here, I was the head of school at a small high school in Kigutu, Burundi, called Kigutu International Academy. I think at that point, I was like, look, I have been traveling the world. It's nice to see different cultures, but I'm ready to come back home. So it was really good to get the opportunity to come to Moringa, and I've been here for about 1.5 years now.
Wow, I already know from that intro that we are in for a very interesting conversation. I'm very keen to know what this journey that you've put together is all about. So I think I'm just going to take you back to the beginning of when you mentioned that you initially thought that you were going to get into chemistry or chemical engineering. So when you were younger or in primary or high school, walk us through that journey of when you thought it was going to be this. I think we can start there.
I think I was fortunate enough. I wasn't good at many things, right? But I was good in class, right? And I think the sciences were good to me. They came easy to me. And so straight from primary school in Eldoret and into Kabarak High School, I think that's where my love for the sciences was, fomented. And I just enjoyed chemistry. Was my favorite subject. I think, unfortunately or fortunately, our education system forces you to, especially when you do well in school, it forces you to just think about your academic journey based on the things that you're good at in class only.
100%.
And so I remember signing my university forms, and chemical engineering was one of them. I never really wanted to be a doctor. It wasn't my thing. I wasn't, blood makes me queasy. So I didn't really want to do that. And because chemistry and physics were my favorite classes, I said, you know what? Physics, there's some engineering.
Yeah.
Chemistry, then you combine the two, chemical engineering. So there was no art to the decision making around wanting to go into the sciences.
Wow, that's very interesting because chemistry was my worst subject, worst performing throughout high school. It just never came to me. Never, ever. From the time I entered, I even did tutoring, post,
Nothing.
when you're on holidays, tutoring. Chemistry was just not my thing, but I did enjoy physics. So that's very interesting to see someone who was really interested in those particular subjects. Okay, so then you decide that, it's going to be chemical engineering.
Yes.
So where did you end up doing university? And then where did the shift get into you?
In between, just before, I think I even still have my papers for chemical engineering. I was called to Moringa University, never ended up there. In between there, I got into a program called KENSAP. They take high-performing students to Ivy Leagues in the US. And so I got a merit scholarship to Barnard College of Columbia University in New York. And off I went. So
first of all, congratulations. That's no small feat. That's something to acknowledge.
So I didn't get to go to university here. I went off to New York, and I think it was interesting to see the shift between, and even when you were asked to sign up for your first classes before you join, and all my classes were chemistry, math, physics, the ones that I knew I was good at. But when I got there, I remember my academic advisor telling me, you know what? You don't have to do these subjects. Like we have tens of courses. They require you to do like some English here, some math here. They have some core courses that you have to take. There are photography classes, and all of them sort of build up. The classes that you need to take for your major are fewer than the ones that you need to graduate. Those other ones explore. And I think that's how I ended up doing a lot of African studies classes. I did a lot of economics classes. I still did math, but then I realized, you know what? I don't want to be in a lab, doing experiments. It was dark and boring. I really didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so after my first year, I switched up and I did, and you don't have to declare your major until the end of your sophomore year. So at the end of my sophomore year, I declared a major in economics and a minor in African studies.
Okay, and I think just with you saying that, it leads me to ask the question, African parents stereotypically, when you choose a course, sometimes they may have a bit of qualms of you deciding, okay, maybe you're abroad and now you're deciding, okay, I want to do something else apart from this major. So were your parents supportive of that decision, or was it a bit of a challenge for you?
I don't know I don't remember if I told my parents that I had switched my major. I think my parents were just really happy that I'd left the country, to be very honest, and that I had gone to a really good university. When I was in university, I was still very apprehensive about making sure that I make money out of once I graduate. So in between, I did my internships in investment banks. because I was like, that's the only way. If I'm not going to become an engineer, I might as well make money. And I was in Manhattan, so that's the place to do all these fancy internships with investment banks. And I did that, and I just didn't like the investment banking culture at all.
What was it about the culture that...
It was like very, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, it was very white.
Okay.
And very like male, and very all about like closing deals, and it just was not a place that I felt that I could thrive, right? And it was around, I think, my junior year, at the end of my junior year, which is my third year, that I decided, look, I'm not needed in this country. When I graduate, I'm definitely going back to the African continent. That I didn't tell anyone. Then I knew it was going to be a problem because, again, I told you my parents were just happy that I'd left. A lot of my relatives and a lot of our friends who'd gone were relatively successful. And so that was a picture of success. Now, what was I coming back to do here? I finished my internships in investment banks, but I knew I was not going to. So I started exploring NGO and education opportunities at the time, because a lot of people, most people in universities, you start applying for jobs in your junior and your senior year.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. So what happens in between now, your senior year and you're about to graduate, and your plan is to come back to Africa? What was that like?
So I don't remember I remember there was a lot of anxiety around getting jobs. Because a lot of the ones that were on the table were investment banking jobs, as I'd said. But by chance, I met Fred Swanika and Chris Bradford, who at that time had founded African Leadership Academy, which evolved and became and is now African Leadership Group. And I think the way that they were talking, and I think at that time, there was a lot of conversations around, even more than there was now, around like Africa as a new frontier, all these exciting opportunities around like transforming Africa, leadership in Africa. Conversations that I feel like before that, you go to the US, you get really good opportunities in high-performing universities, and you stay there. Right? But then there was this movement that was happening of like people coming back home, and not just coming back home to sit, but to come home and actually make
impactful change.
Exactly, impactful change. And so I was so lucky that I bumped into this fantastic group of Africans who were coming back and who had very big visions for the African. I jumped on the bandwagon. So they offered me a job before I graduated to become a teacher at African Leadership Academy, and that's how I graduated. And within a month, I was on a flight to South Africa, and then I told people once I was already there.
You told people once you were already there?
Yes, I didn't sleep.
What was the reaction then?
I think there were things like, oh my goodness, you've gone through such an amazing education experience to become a teacher.
The perception of teachers especially.
Madam.
I think that would have definitely been a shock. And any parents that I think, especially just the way we are raised here in Kenya, hearing that information is not, you've gone to Columbia University to go become a teacher. That's a big piece of news. And did you feel that making that decision, were you 100% sure that this was the right decision?
It was the best decision of my life. Other than going to the US for school, that was the best decision of my life, because I think from the people that I worked with, to the students who are in my, who I taught, some of whom I currently work with, some of whom are doing fantastic things across the African continent, best decision. It was, for me, it was the picture of where education should go, right? Where you're empowering your students, you have empowered educators, you have an entrepreneurial mindset embedded within an education system. You have learning that is guided by values. It has literally formed the blueprint of how I think about myself, my work, and where I want to be and where I want to go. Yeah. Okay.
I think before we get now into your journey back to Africa, I just wanted to ask you a bit of a personal question. While you were in New York for those couple of years for university, this, I think, can help people who are thinking of studying abroad or are looking to get those kind of opportunities. What would you say was the impact in your personal life in terms of the cultural differences? Was there a time you felt alone? Was there a time that, you felt that this is not as glamorous as people make it seem? I mean, you were in Manhattan, which is, presumably said to be one of the best places to be and, make an impactful change, but you were also feeling a bit of a strain from being there, as you've mentioned, especially in investment banking, which again, a lot of people romanticize.
Correct.
So yeah, I just want you to walk us through that kind of experience.
Okay, let me start with the not so good things. Yes, for sure, the US and Europe is glamorized in a way that, there's a phrase called American exceptionalism, right? They do fantastic PR for that country. Fantastic, right? We should learn how to do our own PR that way. So you go there with an insane expectation of what you'll get, of what you'll see, of what you will become even. And for sure, in my first few months, I had a lot of culture shock. First of all, I didn't know how disgusting trains are. They're very dirty. It doesn't, sometimes like when it snows, like basic things, it's like a very dirty city sometimes.
Yeah, the rats are the size of...
Oh my God.
A dog. You'd think it's like
ridiculous.
a chihuahua. Yeah.
So in that sense, and then even like getting used to the food, right? The rice doesn't taste the same.
The eggs are pathetic.
The sausages don't taste the same. The meat, everything doesn't taste. So it has to have, you have a period of adjustment, right? And then the social norms are also not the same, right?
Yeah,
you are starting from scratch. I had the unfortunate experience of like a lot of the peers that I went with had other people or other Kenyans and a big Kenyan community, or not necessarily big, but like a relatively sizable community within the universities that they went to. I didn't. But I did end up finding and meeting a couple of people who are Kenyan. Most of the people who I socialized with, for good or bad, were mostly white, as it happened. And I mean, you have to figure out how to get your place in the social scene. One thing I really appreciated, though, is that, of course, I was coming in with, on top of everything else, right? It being like your first year of university, like everybody else, you're coming in with like a cultural barrier. But I really appreciated that the university went extra miles to make sure that they're putting you in social situations, they're giving you tips and tricks. We had crazy discounts to go and see Broadway and plays and go to the ferry and do various activities around the city. So that first year was a lot of learning and like crying and but then, and forming some really, really good friendships as well. There's something I wanted to say that I have forgotten, but it'll come back to me. Oh yes, and then I think what made the biggest difference, especially as an African and as an immigrant, was that I was on a full scholarship. So I didn't have to I worked for my upkeep. I was getting like $12 an hour. And with that, I worked 20 hours a week. I was fine, right? More than fine. And I also didn't have expectations from my parents to send any money back home. So
that's a very important point, actually.
Yeah, so for me, I did not have financial challenges, which is extremely rare for immigrants who move to Europe and the US, because there's a lot of obligation around working to pay your school fees, working to send $100, $200. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So I think that eased my transition into the US. But I think for people who are looking to go to school, the Kenyan economy is really tough. If you want to go. If you have the opportunity to go. But be aware that is with your context, right? If you're going to work and pay for school, just know that it's going to be difficult. And if you want to win the same way like we do it here, having a community is extremely important. It doesn't have to be like a Kenyan community. It's just like go out of your comfort zone, make friends, ask for help. Don't be isolated. Don't do illegal things. I was told I can emphasize. Don't do illegal things, please. Right?
Yes.
Just live with it, because you can do illegal things here and get away with it. But
if you go back there with that mentality,
then you live a miserable existence of like hiding and having to live underground for a long time, and that in itself is a very emotionally draining. Yeah. So if you have the opportunity to go, but go being aware what your circumstances are, what your context is, and just know that it's not necessarily going to be easy.
Okay.
But if you do well, you can do. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are thriving. Yes. So it does give you a crazy leapfrog.
Yeah.
If you work hard. You work hard, you go and use it as an opportunity for learning. If you don't have to take shortcuts, don't, actually go, especially if you're learning, because I was learning, go and take the opportunity to actually tap into the kinds of insane knowledge that they have, right? And crazy R&D that they have. And then you'll be good.
You'll be good. Yeah. Well, thank you for that piece of advice that you've given our audience. I think that if you're looking to go abroad, you've heard it from the best. And I will also take your advice should I decide to do my master's abroad.
Yeah, just don't do illegal things.
Just don't do illegal things. Okay, now we're on your journey back to Africa and specifically South Africa. Okay, so tell us now, walk us through your journey in South Africa. How was that experience now being integrated at Africa Leadership Academy? I can actually tell you, I don't know if it's funny, but a story of in high school that was my dream place to go post high school. Really? Because I knew, just like you said, when you go to a particular institution and the upper hand that it gives you. So me and a couple of my friends were so excited to apply. Actually applied to, get into it post high school 844. And have those foundational years before going to the next step. And it was almost at the back of my mind assured that once I go through this program, I'll be equipped enough to go abroad on a scholarship, even especially because it was at a time my parents weren't able to. Of course, going abroad is expensive, so pay the school fees to go to the kind of caliber of schools that I envisioned myself going to. But somewhere, in Form 1, Form 2 education, I wasn't taking it too seriously. And then now when you start getting it a bit serious and the caliber of students that also apply, I unfortunately didn't make the cut, and I cried heavily for that, but
you're here.
But I'm here. I mean, I'm not complaining at all. I mean, I'm a strong believer that life happens the way it's meant to be. Sure. But I do have a friend who successfully went through the program, and now she's in Spain and doing her own thing. But yeah, it's taking me back to that trauma of when I got my rejection letter. So now hearing from you, what was inside, and tell us about the selection process and, just the experience of working there.
Working, as I said, working at ALA for me as a teacher has been or helped me, create my, the vision that I want in my life. And I think, there's a couple of things that at that time, I actually don't know. I know they've had iterations of their strategy, but at the time, the two big strands of the education system there was African studies and entrepreneurial leadership. They did have, obviously, because even when you want to transform an education system, transform anything really, they say you work with what you have to get to where you want, right? So what they had to work with was an established curriculum, which is Cambridge. And so we were doing A-levels. Students had a wide range of classes that they could take. And the good thing about A-levels is that you just pick 3 and you focus on that. And the rest of the time, we had African Studies, which was a part of the team, and then entrepreneurial leadership, which sometimes I used to teach in that as well. And so at the end of the experience, not even at the end, it's been so long, man. It's been almost 10 years. Yeah. During the 2 years that you're there as a student, you're expected to either, first of all, volunteer in the community as well as start your own entrepreneurial enterprise, right? And then you had your educators, your teachers as your mentors. And then I think one of the things that I mentioned was that life was guided by values. So I remember one of their values was gratitude. And every week, I think, during the weekly assembly, we had specific people recognized for the values that they did. And it was not just like, oh, I'm grateful to Mary, she gave me a cup of tea. No, it was like actually thinking about actions that people did during the week that actually helped propel you forward. Another one was, I think, humility. And I don't remember the others. I think excellence was one of them, integrity. And it was just, I know a lot of people and a lot of companies, we do to have values, but it was really about living and ensuring that both educators and students live the values. Also, the hierarchy between teacher and student was like almost flattened, right? I saw myself, and I think the spirit of the school was that your teacher is the facilitator of knowledge and not necessarily the holder of it, right? So in my economics class, because I used to teach development economics as well, yes, we teach the foundations, but at the end of it, I expected at least my students at that class to have a research paper and to, think through and read some of the big economic thinkers and write something up, something that is not necessarily done in a lot of high schools here. You're just regurgitating things, right? We left the regurgitation to the Cambridge one. And then everything else that you did in entrepreneurial leadership and African studies was very much about living a life that helps you build your person so that you can actually be impactful on the African continent. And I think for us it was very specific because there were students from all over the African continent, from North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Central, South. Yeah. And then I think another very big differentiating factor were two things. One was the college placement, as you said, was a very, very big part of the ALA journey. ALA, you better pay me. Of the ALA.
Yeah, we are getting a free promo here, actually.
And then there was a career services. And that office worked with the students who are graduating from universities in the US and in Europe, and was actually placing them into jobs or entrepreneurial opportunities on the African continent. So it needed to be full circle. You start at the high school, you go to universities, wherever, but the aim is always to come back
home. I really like that. And I love institutions that I think everybody that we featured on this podcast has that similar goal of, building Africa. And that's also the theme of, this season on My Tech Story Africa is, how can we highlight people and institutions that are enabling Africans or across the continent to make impactful change. Across the continent. And I think that's also why I gained an interest in Moringa School, which led me to you. And to circle back to everything that you've said, it seems that throughout this experience, you're also learning how to, train these students to get to their full potential and, become successful entrepreneurs across the continent. And so walk me through now that journey from ALA to then Moringa, and with the skills that you've been equipped with throughout the years. How would you say you can individually be proud and say that this is the impactful change I've made in the lives of particular students or people?
All right. So post ALA, I came back to Kenya briefly.
Oh, yes. Then you went to Burundi.
And I would say I'll say I was the lead consultant for M-Pesa Foundation Academy.
Oh, yes.
Right. So working with a team, very small team, to bring the academy to life. And I was really young. So I think one of the things that I truly believe is that you need to teach leadership early, or you need to have people experience leadership early, right? being in the same room as leaders at Safaricom, planning, architects, and having conversations with people from the Ministry of Education around some of the things that we wanted to do differently for the school, thinking about strategy documents, how are we going to actually have a structure that makes sense for this school? How do we make sure that the same way that Safaricom and M-Pesa's brand is around the country, that we make sure that our admissions process for the students is actually countrywide? That really pushed my leadership, my self-awareness skills. And it was hard as hell, but I was very grateful for it. Mm-hmm. I'm very grateful for the M-Pesa team actually trusting me with such a pivotal role.
Yes.
I then left and I went back to the AL group in ALU. I think at that time they were trialing some leadership courses within their universities, and they also needed to project manage just a few things. I had already had some experience here with accreditation and things like that. And so I went there for a year. I think the M-Pesa Foundation experience was really good, but it was really tough. And I think I needed a break. So that's where I went and took a break. And it was really good taking a break in Rwanda. I know you've been there.
Yes.
So it's a very calm country. It's actually the best place to go and that's like Wosa for for a year, because I was only there for a year. And then another leadership role came calling to be the head of school at Kigutu International Academy. Very similar high school structure to ALA, because they were doing Cambridge. It was Burundi's high school is about 3 years, sort of what we're moving to as Kenya. And they also just wanted to have the same sort of learning principles as ALA, not completely replicated just because the culture is so vastly different and it's specifically for Burundian students. And so I was there for about three plus years. I think working for M-Pesa Foundation Academy gave me the raw skills, and then I sort of polished them a bit in Burundi. And I think that for me, what really triggered me to come back home was COVID. I was in Burundi during COVID. Burundi was completely isolated because they didn't acknowledge the existence of COVID, I think. So there were some rules that you needed to do, to get vaccines and stuff. So anyway, the country was on lockdown, as many other places. And we couldn't move, right? And I was like, no, I can't be this far away from home for this long. It's been, I think at that point it was maybe 10, 11 years of just moving around. Yeah. And so I started plotting my comeback. Of course, a lot of opportunities everywhere in the world had been reduced because companies were downsizing. Everybody was just watching. Yeah. So I had to wait. And then last year, I got the opportunity to join Moringa. Was it last year? It was last year. Or the year before. It was the year before. My goodness, I've been here for a year now. For
more than a year.
More than a year. Yeah.
Okay. And how would you say your experience at Moringa has been?
It's been amazing, to be honest. It's been amazing. I think, Moringa is a learning accelerator. So it means the courses that, unlike the previous education experiences that I have had, where you are with a student or a learner for 2-3 years, this one you're here with students for sometimes a day to 6 months. Right? And so you have to really think on your feet. How do we make the experience of this student actually as impactful as they want and as we want them to as well? So I've loved working here. I think it's good to be. Moringa has the same underlying guiding principles of an education institution. Like, people would typically not think about it as an education institution just because it's very tech heavy and there's a lot of tech happening. But the underlying principle is that it's actually an education institution. And so values beyond just academic excellence, one of our values is from potential to possibility, right? we're coming in, you are a high school student, you just have a basic interest in tech, we'll figure out where to place you, right? So if you're coming in and you need a lot more help, we will figure out which products to direct you, perhaps not software engineering, maybe start with a product design course. Maybe if it's, data science is too heavy, perhaps start with a data visualization course, just so that you can see what Python, would look like in a data science structure. So yeah, I think we try as much as possible, and I think we do a pretty good job of making sure that we create experiences for students where, for sure, once they graduate, especially those who are looking for employability, that we can be able to work and work with the journey with them to the point where they actually get a job.
And what is the rate of that student success story of having people being integrated to the actual work environment from the students that come from Moringa?
So a bulk of our students, especially those who are coming in from high school, a lot of them are just looking to build skills. Some of them also have been pushed by their parents, which is totally acceptable in this culture. So come in, you finish Form 4, you're wasting time at home, come in, go to Moringa and find something to do. So a lot of these students, but they end up, a lot of them end up, wanting to come back, wanting to upskill. But for those who are actually, I would say maybe 50% of our students are that, right? Students who are coming in to just build skills, and after that they actually go into university. So they're not looking for employment.
That's fair.
But the other half who are on our employability pathway, who are explicitly coming saying we're looking for employment, we actually put them into that track, and we work with them from the time they graduate usually, and we're trying to make sure that it actually starts earlier, and actually 12 months after they leave and complete their courses at Moringa, and we make sure that they try and get a job. So our success rate is about 70%.
That's really good. Yeah. And if I may ask, what exactly do you do to enable that process of students to be integrated to the workplace? Do you send them opportunities that tech companies are having across the continent or across Kenya, or how do you go about that?
So we have an entire outcomes team, and that's their job. Their job is to look for jobs that match the profiles of the students that we have. When they are in Moringa, we have soft skills programs. So, problem solving, critical thinking, communication, basic soft skills that are necessary in the workplace. Once they get to the end of the funnel into the outcomes team, what they do is, CVs, clean up your CV, mock interviews. What else do you do to prepare, whatever else you need to prepare for a job. And then they have this entire data bank of jobs, right? So they try as much as possible to match these students, to talk to employers, and match these students to actually jobs that exist in the market.
Okay, that's valid. And I mean, it does sound like the work that Moringa does is impactful, including for students that are just looking to gain some technical skills, to people who are looking for employability. I think it's also important to just let our audience know, in case they're looking to get into the institution, what courses that you offer and what your intake looks like.
All right. So here comes the pitch. These are our courses, right? So we have software development or software engineering. Both full-time and part-time. It can also be remote or hybrid. Remote means you have your laptop in Eldoret, right? And you can work and go through the course content. Hybrid means you unfortunately have to be in Nairobi, or fortunately have to be in Nairobi, and you can either access our Victoria Plaza space in Westlands, or our space on Ngong Lane along Ngong Road. So those are the hybrid options. And we have data science. We also have them part-time and full-time. We are introducing a hybrid option for that as well, just because I think students after the pandemic, I think people really like being in spaces together and learning with one another. So for data science, we're introducing a hybrid option as well. We have product design, which is UX, UI. So it's not designing of a product, but actually more on the software development side. Then we have data visualization with Python, which is a short course. It's about 12 weeks. We have two cybersecurity courses. One which is an introductory one, that's about 12 weeks as well. And then we have a boot camp, which is 6 months, and you get a CompTIA certification at the end of that course.
Okay. Yeah. And what does your intake usually look like?
So we have intakes every quarter, right? So our next intake, perhaps by the time you see this, maybe we'll have closed it. For most of our classes is November 27th. So software engineering, data science, we have, I think, November 6th, as well as cybersecurity. All these courses, we'll have them as well in Q1. So we'll have a February 26th intake for software engineering. We have a February 12th intake for data science. And then we have a March intake for the cybersecurity classes.
Okay.
So, but every quarter we have intakes for all these courses.
Okay, that seems fair because some of them are short courses, so it only makes sense for you to do that every quarter. Okay, and I mean, do you want to give advice to anyone who's looking to apply for Moringa or anything that they should know to expect while coming to this institution?
Advice.
That could be a tough question.
It's a tough question. So let me actually look at the profiles that we have for the different courses and what success looks like, and maybe just give advice in that sense.
Yeah.
So I think if you want to go into the software engineering track, it's really important to have interest in coding or technology in general, because it's really hard, right? So you have to have a level of commitment, and then you also have to have interest. So at least that interest, when things get tough, it pushes you, right? I think our big selling point as Moringa is that we have technical mentors who are the instructors. We have a small class size of 30 students per instructor. That instructor is there with you 8 p.m. to 5 p.m., right? You have access to them in the mornings and in the evenings on calls. You have access to them, on Slack or Mattermost or online, right? To get any unblockers. So I think the advice is that please, if you're looking to come to Moringa,
you must
have interest, but do not be afraid to ask for help. Ask for as much help as possible, because we are designed in that way so that you always have people who can respond to your queries.
Yeah, because I think some people might feel like, this is a struggle that I need to keep within myself, or I can't share this with the person who's teaching me, my lecturer or some sort. So yeah, I think it's also very important, especially when the course is as challenging as I assume it is, just based on how I know coders and engineers and designers work. It can be very intensive. So I think talking to people is something that is very crucial for them to become successful in their field. And I will tell you guys that we will also be having some alumni from Moringa to give us a story on how this journey getting to Moringa and post Moringa, how it's been for them, so that you can have the real time story and experience from the eyes of the guests of how it's been post going through that educational program. Okay, I have enjoyed this story, but before we wrap up, I do have some final questions that I do ask every single guest of mine, and I hope you're prepared. I did send you the guiding questions. If you didn't, it's fine. Simple, sweet questions. So the first one that I have for you is, what advice would you give to someone who's aspiring to get to where you are today?
So my advice is, you cannot afford to be afraid. Reason is, I think I grew up, and many of us grew up in settings where we had to be very meek. At least I did, right? And that, it was proper to be quiet and to fade into the background. It just doesn't work. You have to be able to to raise your hand, to ask questions, not to be afraid to sound foolish, be okay with failure, be okay, being rough around the edges, not letting good be the, perfect be the enemy of good. You move, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was just one of the things that I really enjoyed about our college was that there was a very big banner that said unafraid, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just do it unafraid.
The worst thing that will happen is a no or a rejection.
And then you cry and then you move.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, and what's one word to describe the journey to get to where you are today?
Leadership.
I think that is self-explanatory based on the the course of the story that you've shared with us throughout your journey. And finally, do you have any regrets or things that you wish you would have done differently throughout your journey?
I actually do. I think I regret not spending more time with my friends or like cultivating my friendships more. Because I think in the pursuit of being, ambitious and like I need to get to place X, you leave really solid friendships behind sometimes. And I think now as I've continued to grow, I care a lot more about like my social circle than I did back then.
And sorry, just could you give us just a bit more context about what you mean spending more time with your friends? I
think friendships must be intentional, right? You have to call people, make time to see them, care to know what they care about, give them gifts, travel. I find that I enjoy experiences more than I enjoy things, right? And so just having better experiences with friendships and in friendships and with social circles, I regret. But the good thing is that it's a regret that you can fix. So, yeah.
Okay, that's valid, and I am very thankful once again for you gracing our podcast and agreeing to be part of this and sharing your story. I know it's not always easy for people to open up and share theirs, but I'm very happy that you've had the opportunity to grace our podcast. And I do hope throughout your journey as it continues that you keep growing and you keep elevating and you keep growing into the leader that you envision yourself to become and empowering more students to become to get to their full potential, especially through the education that you've been doing over time. And yes, I think with that being said, we can now close off this episode. Thank you once again for tuning in. Please remember to subscribe from wherever you're listening from. It's absolutely free. You can catch our episodes on YouTube if you're listening on the audio listening platforms. And if you're on YouTube, you can catch the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the major podcast listening platforms that you tune into. My name is Alice Kanjajo, your lovely host, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have Claire with us here on this episode. We will still be hearing more stories from the Moringa alumni in the upcoming episodes, but make sure that you tune into the episodes that we've been filming for and getting out there into the world for season 2. And I think we shall see you in the next week. So cheers, and we'll see you in the next one.